I've asked Stephen and gave up trying to get him to point me to like one specific figure which is not a true state of the economy, which will then give basis for what they are trying to do, which is the true state of the economy. In fact, after the president's presentation, Stephen was the minority group who led the presentation of what he called the true state of the economy to the press. You are not telling the country the truth. For now, I don't know which part you are not telling us the truth about because he has not pointed me to it. What is it?
But something, he will never be able to point you to any because there's none. Is he?
So the figures I've given,
Stephen, please
prove me wrong.
Please.
Something I think we are using.
I kept quiet. I kept quiet when you were speaking.
We are not using the right.
I am not going
the
to
right framework.
I'm not going to.
And you will do to him what he did.
Absolutely.
To you.
I think that
you will do to him what he did.
Ground
to you.
rules.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm sorry.
That's right.
I'm sorry.
Please go on. Go on.
This is serious.
Article 67 imposes an obligation on every president, and you are the lawyer. My brother is also a lawyer. To give an account.
It's written in English. We don't have to be lawyers to understand it. Go ahead.
So, a president can go to parliament and spend all the time speaking about what he inherited, and he would have fulfilled the constitutional obligation. Not so. But in this instance, the president said that he was not going to dwell on lamentation. He actually went out, if you read the 59-page statement that he put out, to speak about specific interventions that he will be putting in place in almost every sector that he touched on. So not only did the president miss the constitutional obligation, he actually inspired hope in those who were looking for something beyond just indicating what he came to meet. Something, let me also put it on record, that if my brother here tells you that this economy we inherited is better than the one we left them to existing, it is a palpable untruth. Look, even at a visceral level, what you feel in your gut, that alone is sufficient to tell everybody that this economy is rotten to the core. Something we have only recently engaged in domestic debt exchange, which is the harshest economic policy ever implemented under the Fourth Republic, if not the entire history of Ghana. They took 1.3 million people through excruciating hardships by telling them that money that they were expecting to receive from government after having bought bonds were not going to come. They were going to reduce drastically the interest rate that they had agreed with government, and they were going to extend the maturities. This took 1.3 million people through hell, including Kama. You remember his lamentation on a public platform. May God rest his soul. So even at a visceral level, everybody who has lived in this country knows that this economy cannot be better than what they inherited in 2016. Now let's look at the figures. Something, there's good reason why the president did not dwell on all the economic indicators. There are about 18 of them. In due course, on 11th March, when the finance minister presents his budget, he will go into details about the specific indicators. If you take out the growth rates, all the rest are worse than what they inherited. Indeed, you recall that after the cabinet session, the first cabinet session, I gave a briefing where I indicated that the numbers are far worse than they even put out. Something, it is not true that they left a positive primary balance. It is not true. They set a target of 0.5%, which is supposed to be a surplus. And if you know what the primary balance is, it is simply, crudely speaking, your deficit minus interest payments. Because that is statutory. You don't have a leeway. The deficit that they projected for in 2024, they exceeded by a wide margin. The primary balance, if I give you the figure, the market will shake today. It is not true that they left a surplus. They left a negative, far worse than what they projected. Something, nobody put a gun to their head to project that they will get 18% inflation at the end of 2024. They got 23%, which is far worse than what they projected. When they came to power, they met a public debt of 120 billion. We all know the song and dance that Bawumia and his colleagues in the MPP made over our public debt. When they were leaving, it was 721 billion. Even then, it was because we had some debt write-off recently, after the domestic debt exchange. They had to supplicate before our lenders to let go of our $2.8 billion in debt. That is how come we even have 721. Debt to GDP ratio, we left 55.6. 2 years ago, it was 104%. The gulf is wide. Now, it is in excess of 70%, which is far above the threshold. And in fact, when it comes to debt to GDP ratio, as I was talking, I heard him comparing our debt to GDP ratio to other countries. Something, the figure is even not the issue. Please. Yes, but I did not interrupt when you were making that point. You compared us to countries that have 280% debt to GDP ratio. Something, you are talking about countries that borrow sometimes at 0.5%. You borrow at 9%. But when you come to debt, the real issue is your ability to repay. And it was glaring that you couldn't pay. That is why you asked bondholders to forfeit about 240 billion Ghana cedis to you in your domestic debt exchange program. You have gone to external lenders to ask them to take a haircut because you can't pay your debt. At the time you took over in 2016, we could pay our debt and still have some to deal with domestic problems. You could not pay it. So how does anybody look at this economy and tell you that it is better than what they inherited? That is dishonesty. And you see, it is one thing to have mismanaged the economy, but to gaslight people, look in the face of Ghanaians and tell them things that they know to be untrue, is to add insult to injury. And it is little wonder that you suffered the electoral defeat that you suffered. Why? The people of Ghana have voted clearly on what they think the state of the economy is. And that's why I said that even if you put aside the figures that I've given you and did a visceral assessment of our economy, it is glaring. Now let's talk about the debt. Look, ECG alone.
Wait, hold on with those.
Yes.
ECG, Cocoa Board, and the rest.
Yes.
Hold on. Was the president being faithful to the situation, our true situation, when he referred to the sinking fund,
Yes.
what you call the reserve funds,
Yes.
and left out what Dr. Kabiru Tia Mahama refers us to, that he should have referred to what the Treasury main account, where there was an end of year revenue of 3 billion Ghana cedis. There was also 700 million from Treasury bill subscriptions issued in January that remained unused. Additionally, in January alone, the government received 6 billion cedis due to late payment from December. He's saying that there are other sources that the president ought to have been referring to if he wanted to be fair to the fact, rather than just stick to the one part of what he calls a sinking fund and say he left $250 million and the dollar account now is left with only 64,000.
When sometime last 2 weeks, I put out the statement indicating that the president has authorized the finance minister to do two things. Make sure that he pays off bondholders on 18 February and build buffers towards retiring maturing debts in July and August. The immediate response of the MPP was that they had left buffers. Now, what is a buffer? It is simply earmarked money aimed at a specific activity which is paying debt. That is what it is. All the monies in the accounts you are talking about are monies meant for other things. They were not meant for debt repayment. The account into which you pay money, you keep money to repay debts, at least since 2015, when the NDC established it, is the debt service reserve account, which we popularly call the sinking fund. So when you say you have left buffers, you must indicate exactly what buffers you've left and what it is for. This account, I have the account details here. I've printed all of it. This is a dollar denominated account. This is the CD denominated account. The last transaction that they did in that account, if you take the dollar component, was on 22nd October 2024. After that transaction, the balance in that account was $64,387. And we are talking about payments totaling 15 billion if you add the July and August maturities to it. If you are going to pay 15 billion, do you use $64,000? If you look at the CD account, the last transaction was on 2nd January. After that, the balance was 155 million. We are talking 15 billion Ghana cedis in payment, 6 billion for the maturities that occurred on 18 February, and then 9.2 billion for those that would occur in July and August. And you are talking about Treasury main account and some 700 million, which were not earmarked funds for debt repayment. Look, since we've been in power, in the last 6 weeks, 52 billion Ghana cedis of the debt that they left has been due for payment. I saw that my friends and co, he was in Parliament claiming that we had borrowed 59 billion to create the impression that today, if you pick that public debt, we've added 59 billion Ghana cedis to it. That is not true. All that the Minister of Finance did was to do the routine rollover of maturing debt, which simply means that you go to the Treasury market and take money to replace the debt that you are paying. Now, we are even doing it at a lower interest rate. So when you look at the public debt, it has not moved. The net effect is zero.
There's a question almost all of them were asking when I watched them speak to the press. In less than 2 months, where did you get the money from to do what you are doing if they didn't leave you that money?
People have not stopped paying taxes since they left office, have they? That's what they call teaming. Taxes. Have people stopped paying taxes in Ghana? I've also told you that the finance minister has been doing operations on the T-bill market. If you go and put money for general expenditure, goods and services and what have you, in accounts, and somebody comes and creates a reserve to repay funds, you don't say that you have left money for debt repayment. Their specific response was that they left money for debt repayment. That is what they, is that not the
That's right, right, that's what they said.
So where is the money that they left to repay debt? Goods and services money is not for debt repayment.
They have consistently made how many? About 3 payments so far.
So
and they did not.
They borrowed money to pay $324 million, which was due for payment in January. Since then, they didn't make any provision for future debt payments. And the account that you put money in for that purpose is this one. Debt Service Reserve Account, as the name implies. So when he tells you that they left money for debt repayment, it's not true. Number 2, we have not borrowed 59 billion, or we've not added 59 billion to the public debt. The net effect on the public debt remains the same. As for rolling over maturities, it is something that he used to do as Deputy Minister of Finance, and he knows it. So why do you go out and mislead the public and create a false narrative just to justify the parlor state of the economy that you left? Something, how do you tell me that an economy in which, I beg your pardon, in the next 4 years, we'll be required to pay 280 billion Ghana cedis. Next year alone, we expect tax revenue of just above 200 billion Ghana cedis. 180 billion of that will go into debt servicing because of the debts that they left. ECG alone owes 68 billion. When you asked him about ESLA, he was all over the place. When they came, total debt owed in the energy sector was 10 billion. We had even paid about 2 billion out of it already. They've collected 45 billion Ghana cedis in the last 8 years in ESLA. And yet, they've left a debt of 70 billion in the energy sector, including what ECG owes. Cocoa Board owes 32 billion Ghana cedis. As I speak to you, they left a deficit of over 330 metric tons of cocoa beans to supply. They took money from people, promised to deliver a certain amount. They didn't deliver it. So they've squandered the money, and yet they didn't supply the beans. So now, every cocoa tonnage that we have to produce this year, part of it must be committed to the debt that they created. Because of that, the cocoa sector is losing $840 million.
Okay.
We lose $4,000 on each ton of cocoa that is produced this year because of the agreements they made.
Right. And
Look,
when you
go to the road sector alone, if you take out the debt of 21 billion that they left in terms of certificates that have been presented for payment, they've made commitments of over 105 billion Ghana cedis, some of which that didn't have commencement certificates. And yet, they awarded contracts to contracts. Some of them have moved onto the site. Others have not shown up. But we have to find 105 billion Ghana cedis.
The president said 85% of contracts awarded in road sector have stalled, and over 20 billion was the debt in that area.
Yes, so
you are mentioning 100 plus.
This is when I say commitment. The government says, Stephen, go and do this road. This is the volume of the contract. Samson, go and do this road. This is the volume of the contract. Once it remains on your books, it becomes a commitment. You have committed yourself. You see, you have committed yourself to pay. It amounts to 105 billion. Meanwhile, you don't have 105 billion sitting anywhere to pay.
Steve, I can hear you. I can hear you complain to my friend. I'll come to you shortly.
Look,
I'll come to you shortly. Now, listen.
The health sector alone.
Listen.
If you go to the health sector alone.
Hold on for me.
It's
Steve,
your show, but when it
so,
comes
so
to
listen.
I'm being honest.
Stephen, anytime you come on this show, you have this complaint. Let me tell you. Anytime you come on this, Stephen, wait. Anytime you come on this show, you have this complaint. Do you know why? It is not because I am the problem. That, as a matter of fact, I'll tell you.
But if
you check the period, now listen, wait. And you see, this is how the work goes. Viewers, Felix is not coming here claiming that the things the president said are not true. So I will not have too many questions for him. It is Stephen who claims that the things the president said are not true. And for which matter,
explain why.
They will hold a press conference again after what he actually did after the president presentation to tell us about the true state of the economy. So he will have to take a number of questions from me. And a primary question I asked him, I still am waiting one simple answer to it. He didn't give.
I think I answered you.
You did not.
You didn't want to.
So Felix, wait.
So let me go on.
And in fact, you spend more time than he has.
Something, yes.
Okay.
Something.
Yeah.
It's not sector alone. If you put all the commitments together, they owe 15 billion Ghana cedis in the health sector alone. If you go to the communication sector, 3 billion Ghana cedis. Even the defense ministry owes 3 billion Ghana cedis.
The question we are asking now is, in the face of all of this, the president says, I will fix this
Absolutely.
economy. How is he going to do it?
He's going to do it. First of all, you have to be prudent in the way that you spend resources. You don't take money and spend all of it on consumption like they were doing. Having all manner of programs with fanciful names and throwing money down the drain. So he said that first of all...
First you use, they squandered. Then now you say they are throwing money down the drain.
Look, in the last 8 years, if you use the same measure that Baumia used to assess the NDC government, in terms of how much revenue came into the kitty, we had about 250 billion Ghana cedis between 2009 2016. They got almost 1 trillion Ghana cedis. And yet they saddled us with this sort of debt. President Mahama says that we have to be prudent. So there will be significant cuts from the beginning, starting with the size of government. Samson, I am government minister responsible for communications, right? Government communications. There was a ministry that used to do that. They had 76 people managing government information alone. Today there's me, there's my deputy Shamima, and less than 5 people involved in the management of government information. So that is a cut there. So there are 60 ministers. At a point they had 125, and you lamented it to the hilt, and nothing was done. When they were leaving, they had almost 80. They are 60 now. They had 336 political appointees, which if you added to over the 600 civil servants and officers of the president, ran into 1,000. President Obama says he will have none of that. We will come nowhere near that figure under him. Of course, you can't do much about the civil servants.
So it's okay.
But at least the political appointees, you can do something about. And then the resources that we get will be used judicially. Look at what is happening with the national service. Something.
Right. We'll go there.
Let me land.
We'll go there. National service is a separate matter.
No,
thank you.
That's fine. Now.